Hey, hello everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Surface podcast. I'm your host Mohammed, and today we're diving into a topic that has honestly shifted my perspective on life: the psychology of Alfred Adler. Before doing that, let me ask you this question: how would your life change if you stopped seeking approval? Now, I know I've mentioned before that I've been reading a lot of psychology recently, but something about Adler's work really clicked with me. If you have ever felt like your past keeps holding you back or wondered why some people seem to thrive despite the odds, well, this episode is for you. Let me start by telling you how I came across Adler's ideas. It all began with the book The Courage to be Disliked. And let me tell you, the first time I read it, I felt like I was reading something that was just for me. Maybe you've had those moments when a book feels like it's just speaking directly to you. Well, that was how it was for me with Adler. I remember reading a chapter where he talked about how we create our own limitations, and I thought, this makes so much sense. Adler has a way of cutting through the noise and showing you how your own choices are what really shape your life. The more I dug into his ideas, the more fascinated I became. It wasn't just theoretical, by the way. This stuff was so practical, and that's why I wanted to share this psychology with you today, actually. It's not just about understanding ourselves, but also about taking control of our lives and moving forward, regardless of the situation we are in or where we have been. Alright, so before we dive into the heart of Adler's ideas, let's quickly talk about who actually was Alfred. Adler was an Austrian psychologist who lived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He was actually one of Freud's early colleagues, by the way, but their views were pretty different actually. While Freud was all about focusing on the unconscious and past trauma, Adler took a completely different approach. He believed that the future, our goals and ambitions, play a much bigger role in shaping who we are than our past. And honestly, this focus on the future and our ability to change for the better, no matter what we have been through, really sets Adler apart. Adler coined the term individual psychology. And no, it's not about being selfish or focusing only on yourself. It's actually about understanding that every person is a unique individual with a goal oriented life path. The idea that we're all striving for something greater than ourselves, something that gives us meaning in life. And unlike Freud, who thought that childhood trauma was the root of all of our problems, Adler, on the other hand, focused on the present and how we actively work toward our future goals. That's pretty big shift, right? His ideas were all about empowerment and taking responsibility. Adler once said, meanings are not determined by situations, but we determine ourselves by the meanings we give to situations. Honestly, this quote stuck with me since the moment I read it. It's so true, isn't it? Now that we have got a sense of who Adler was, let's dive into some of his core ideas. Adler's approach is all about personal empowerment, by the way, and it has some game changing implications for how we view ourselves and the world around us. Let's break down a few of his most important concepts. First of all, we have the idea of inferiority complex. Adler believed that we all experience feelings of inferiority at some point in our lives. Whether it's physical, emotional, or social, these feelings can stem from childhood experiences, but they don't define us. Adler argued that these feelings of inferiority are natural and, in fact, they can be a driving force behind our growth. Here's the key part: Adler didn't see inferiority as something to be ashamed of. Instead, he viewed it as a powerful motivator, actually. Imagine this. We are all driven by a need to overcome our inferiority and prove to ourselves that we can thrive. That's where Adler's concept of striving for superiority comes in. Now, don't confuse this with arrogance or being better than others. It's more about becoming the best version of yourself. It's a personal journey, a desire to grow and overcome the challenges that life throws at you. Let's make this practical. Maybe you faced a tough situation where you felt inferior or not good enough. Whether it's in your career or your relationships, Adler would say that those feelings of inadequacy don't have to hold you back. Instead, they can be the fuel to push you forward, to help you become the person you want to be. For example, let's say that you've been struggling with public speaking, as an example. You feel nervous, you doubt yourself, and you think, I'm not good enough. According to Adler, that feeling of inferiority is actually normal. It's part of your journey, but here's the thing. By actively working to improve your skills, you're not just overcoming the inferiority, you're striving for personal growth actually. And over time, that struggle becomes your strength. This reminds me of something Brené Brown talks about in her research on shame and vulnerability. She argues that the power of vulnerability is key to overcoming shame. Instead of hiding our perceived weaknesses or avoiding situations where we feel inferior, embracing vulnerability is what helps us grow and connect with others. It's not about avoiding discomfort, but about being brave enough to show up as who we are. Other psychology aligns with this actually. It's about moving through feelings of inferiority and using them as a stepping stone for improvement. Now, let's move to one of Adler's most beautiful concepts, social interest. Adler believed that true happiness comes from contributing to society, not from competing with others. We are all social beings, and our ability to work well with others is key to living a fulfilling life. But here's the twist. Adler didn't just mean being nice to people or helping others for the sake of nothing. He believed that we should genuinely care about the well-being of those around us. Our connections with others, whether it's in our families, friendships, or communities, that's what makes life meaningful actually. Adler saw the importance of community and cooperation, and he stressed that a person's level of happiness and mental well-being is directly tied to how much they contribute to the greater good of society. Yes, you might be thinking, oh, is he a utilitarian? Well, actually, he was. He's a utilitarian psychologist, but this isn't about self sacrifice or constantly putting others before you, but rather about fostering mutual respect and working towards shared goals. When you live with social interest, you're more likely to build strong, meaningful relationships and contribute to a healthier, happier society, right? Let's bring this into a more practical scenario. Think about a work environment where everyone is in it for themselves, constantly competing and trying to outdo each other. It creates tension, doesn't it? But imagine a workplace where people genuinely care about each other's success, where there's cooperation instead of competition. Actually, this can happen among friends too. That's what Adler meant by social interest. It's about creating space where people can support one another and grow together as a society. And finally, one of the most powerful ideas that Adler put forward is the courage to be disliked. If you have ever read The Courage to be Disliked before, you will know exactly what I'm talking about right now. Adler believed that in order to live a fulfilling life, we need to stop seeking approval from others. We need to stop trying to fit into societal molds to please everyone around us or to constantly seek validation. This is a huge. Adler wasn't suggesting that we should be selfish or disregard the feelings of others. The moment we stop seeking validation and start living in accordance with our own values, that's when we can truly take responsibility for our lives. This reminds me of the film Into the Wild. It's the story of Christopher McCandless, a young man who rejects society's expectations and goes on a journey of self-discovery in the Alaskan wilderness. In the movie, He chooses to live on his own terms without the need for approval from his family or even society. For McCandless, it wasn't about being selfish. It was about finding his own path, free from the constraints that others try to impose on him. Well, that's something Adler talks about too. The need to take full responsibility for your life and not to be confined by external expectations. So, let's pause for a moment and think about how many times have you felt held back by what others might think of you? It could be something as simple as, what if they judge me? Or, what if they think I'm not good enough? Adler's message here is so clear. Stop waiting for others to approve of you. When you free yourself from that need of validation, you can start making decisions based on what you truly want, not what society or others expect from you. So, now let's take a moment to talk about Adler's legacy in the field of psychology. His ideas didn't just challenge the status quo, they shaped the direction of modern psychology in ways that are still influential today. One of Adler's most significant contributions is his development of individual psychology. Unlike other psychological approaches that focus primarily on pathology or unconscious desires, Adler, on the other hand, emphasized the importance of individuals striving for growth and the desire to contribute to society. His holistic view of human nature focused on the social and cultural factors that influence personality, and he also saw people as active participants in shaping their own destinies. In fact, Adler was one of the first psychologists to introduce the idea of social interest, the belief that our well being is closely tied to our ability to connect and care for others. This focus on social connection was revolutionary at the time, as many of his contemporaries were focused on individualism or unconscious drives. Adler also introduced the idea of inferiority complex, the notion that feelings of inferiority, while often experienced as painful, can motivate us to strive for success and personal growth. This concept helped shift the focus of psychology away from examining symptoms of illness toward understanding the motivational factors behind human behavior. His work on the importance of goals and the creative self made psychology more accessible and less deterministic than Freud's or Jung's theories. But perhaps Adler's greatest contribution was his rejection of Freud's emphasis on sexual drives as the primary motivator behind human behavior. Instead, Adler argued that the will to power, the drive to overcome challenges and achieve mastery, was central to human life. This humanistic approach opened up a new avenue for personal empowerment, showing us that our actions are shaped by our aspirations, not just unconscious drives or repressed desires. Now, you might be wondering, how does Adler compare to Freud and Jung? Well, all three of these men are giants in the field of psychology, but their theories diverged in some crucial ways. Freud, as you might know, is the father of psychoanalysis. His theories were deeply focused on the unconscious mind, childhood trauma, and the role of sexuality in human development. Freud believed that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious desires and unresolved conflicts, particularly related to sex and aggression. His approach to therapy was often about uncovering repressed memories and desires through techniques like dream analysis and free associations. While Freud's work laid the foundation for much of modern psychology, it also focused heavily on pathology, on what was wrong with the individual rather than what was right. Jung, on the other hand, was a disciple of Freud before they parted ways over differences in their views. While Freud focused on sexuality, Jung was more interested in the collective unconscious, the idea that all humans share a deep, universal set of memories and archetypes that shape our behavior. Jung also placed great emphasis on personal transformation and individuation, becoming who you truly are by integrating your unconscious mind with your conscious self. He looked at symbols, mythology, and the spiritual dimensions of the human experience. In contrast, Adler's approach was much more socially oriented and goal focused. While Freud and Jung emphasized the unconscious and early childhood experiences, Adler looked at how we use our past experiences to shape our future. Instead of focusing on repressed desires, Adler was more interested in the goals we set for ourselves and how those goals drive our behaviors. In this way, he was far ahead of his time in terms of promoting personal responsibility and self empowerment. Adler's theory also differed from Freud and Jung in how it viewed human motivation. While Freud saw much of human behavior as a result of unconscious desires and repressed instincts, and Jung focused on the importance of integrating the unconscious with the conscious, Adler believed that our main motivation is the will to overcome our feelings of inferiority and to strive for superiority through social connection and contribution. So, why does Adler's work still matter today? In a world where we often feel overwhelmed by societal pressures, where competition and comparison run rampant, Adler's ideas offer a refreshing perspective. He taught us that we don't have to be prisoners of our past or our circumstances. We can choose to take responsibility for our lives, strive for personal growth, and connect meaningfully with others. His ideas about overcoming inferiority, building social interest, and living authentically have actually influenced modern therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy or SBT, which focuses on changing thought patterns to improve emotional well being. And if you have listened to our episode on narcissism, you will recognize how Adler's emphasis on changing our thought patterns and taking responsibility for our actions overlaps with many of the concepts we discussed there. Adler's rejection of the idea that our past defines us and his emphasis on personal agency continue to shape the way we understand and approach mental health today. His belief that individuals have the power to change resonates strongly in a world where people are constantly looking for ways to overcome challenges, improve themselves, and make a positive impact on the world. And by the way, if you are curious about Freud's and Jung's views on psychology, don't worry. We'll be diving into those in the future episodes, where we will explore their theories in more detail. Before we wrap up this episode, there's one more key idea in Adler's psychology that I think is worth mentioning: his perspective on childhood and early experiences. A lot of psychological theories, especially Freud's, focus on childhood as something that determines who we become. While Adler didn't deny that early experiences shape us, he had a much more empowering perspective. He argued that what truly matters isn't what happened to us in childhood, but rather how we interpret and respond to those experiences. For example, two people can grow up in the same household, face similar struggles, but come out of it with completely different perspectives on life. One might use their difficult past as a motivation to grow, while another might feel stuck in patterns of self doubt. Adler believed that our perception of our past plays a much bigger role than the events themselves. This is actually liberating because it means that no matter what we have been through, we are not doomed by our past. We always have the power to reshape our narrative and move forward with a sense of purpose and self determination. Adler's view is a reminder that while our past can explain where we started, it doesn't have to dictate where we are going. Now, let's switch things up and get to the practical side of Adler's ideas. It's one thing to talk about his theories, but How can we actually apply them to our everyday lives? Well, Adler's work is full of insights that can help us grow as individuals, improve our relationships, and live more fulfilling lives. Let's break down some key takeaways that you can start using today. One of the cornerstones of Adler psychology is the idea that we are responsible for our own lives. This might sound simple, right? But it's incredibly empowering. Adler believed that we have the ability to shape our destiny by how we choose to respond to our circumstances. While we can't control everything that happened to us, we can control how we react to it. For example, instead of seeing yourself as a victim of your past or your environment, Adler encourages you to adopt a mindset of personal responsibility. This means not blaming others for your situation and instead asking yourself, what can I do now to improve my situation? It's about owning your choices, even the ones that might be hard to admit. This idea ties back to what we discussed earlier about the importance of taking control of your life and not letting your past define you. Adler's message is clear. You have the power to change, and by taking responsibility for your actions, you can start building the life you want. The next takeaway is Adler's concept of social interest, which is essentially the idea that our well being is deeply tied to our ability to contribute and to connect. Adler saw humans as social beings, and he believed that true happiness comes from meaningful connections. This is a huge departure from other psychologists like Freud, who focused more on individual drives and inner conflict. In practical terms, this means finding ways to contribute to the community, whether that's through helping others, being a good listener, or even just showing empathy and understanding in your relationships. When we focus on contributing to the collective good, we not only enrich the lives of those around us, but also increase our own sense of purpose and fulfillment. So, think about your own life. How can you connect with others more meaningfully? Are you actively engaging in relationships that allow you to both give and receive support? Adler would argue that these connections are essential for mental and emotional well being. Another central idea in Adler's psychology is the concept of inferiority complex. Now, we all have insecurities and feelings of inadequacy from time to time, but Adler warned us against letting those feelings control our lives. Instead of letting feelings of inferiority drag you down, Adler suggested that you use them as a motivation to strive for personal growth. This doesn't mean ignoring your weaknesses, by the way, or pretending that they don't exist. It means acknowledging them, then setting goals to overcome them. For instance, if you are struggling with self confidence, Adler will encourage you to take small steps to build it up. Whether it's by setting achievable goals or learning new skills, Adler's philosophy shows us that even our perceived weaknesses can be powerful sources for motivation. Adler was a huge believer in setting meaningful goals and focusing on the big picture. This means thinking about the kind of person you want to be and what kind of impact you want to have on the world. It's easy to get caught up in the small day to day issues that don't even really matter in the long run. But Adler encouraged us to zoom out and think about our purpose, the legacy we want to leave behind. This ties back to what we touched on earlier about not seeking approval from others. Instead of focusing on short term validation, Adler encouraged us to look at the broader goals that align with our values. What are you truly passionate about? What would you do if you weren't worried about other people's opinions? And finally, let's talk about the importance of courageous vulnerability. Adler believed that to live an authentic life, we must be willing to expose our true selves, flaws, insecurities, and all. This may sound scary, right? But it's also incredibly freeing. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create the possibility for real connection and personal growth. If you are familiar with Brené Brown's work, this will resonate with you actually. She talks extensively about the power of vulnerability in building trust and connection. Adler's ideas kind of mirroring this, showing us that we don't have to hide behind masks or pretend to be perfect. Instead, we can embrace our imperfections and learn from them. Alright, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we have explored in this episode. We started by diving into who Alfred Adler was and why his ideas still matter today. Unlike Freud, who focused heavily on the past and the unconscious, Adler emphasized personal agency, the idea that we are not defined by our past but by how we choose to interpret and respond to it. We then explored some of his key psychological concepts, how feelings of inadequacy can either hold us back or drive us forward, the idea that true fulfillment comes not from competition but from contributing to society and forming meaningful connections, and also letting go of the need for approval and embracing authenticity. We also touched on how Adler's ideas influenced modern psychology, particularly cognitive behavior therapy or SBT, and how his work laid the foundation for many of today's self-improvement philosophies. And of course, we highlighted how our past does not define us. It's our interpretation of what it truly matters. In upcoming episodes, we'll be exploring the ideas of Jung and Freud in more depth, diving into their psychological theories and how they compare to Adler's approach. And if you haven't already, check our episode on narcissism, where we also discussed SBT and how our thought patterns shape our reality. Alright, this is the end of our episode. If you found this episode insightful, don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts. Do Adler's ideas resonate with you? Have they changed the way you see your own experiences? Let's keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out, and you'll find our email in the description. And as you can tell, I'm a bit sick today, but I didn't want to kind of postpone this episode anymore because I've chose the topic maybe a week ago and I made all of my research, but I was so sick and I couldn't even speak a word. But today I just decided to record myself and doing it anyway. So I just apologize for my voice today, but it's not that important, you know. I know that you won't mind. So thanks for listening today. Stay curious and see you next episode.